Picture this, a frozen wasteland, no homes, no firewood stockpiles, no comfort food, just endless white, howling winds and cold that bites harder than a saber-toothed cat. This was Ice Age Earth, and you? You were a Homo sapien with nothing but a stone blade, a hide cloak, and whatever instincts evolution stuffed into your brain. And yet, humans survived. Not just survived, they conquered. They faced off against the biggest climate roller coaster in history and came out alive. No GPS, no weather app warnings, just grit, fire, and a whole lot of mammoth fat. Here's the twist. They weren't barely scraping by. They were innovators, survival artists, the original life hackers. They turned bones into sewing needles, animal guts into waterproof threads, and wore fashion made from creatures they had to stab in the neck first. If that's not couture with consequences, what is? The Ice Age wasn't a single frozen monolith either. It was a moody mess. Cycles of glacial expansion and retreat meant humans had to stay mobile. When ice moved in, they moved out. When grasslands opened up, they hunted. When the cold bit harder, they adapted. It wasn't a static world, it was Earth with mood swings and a killer frostbite problem. Imagine a world where the sun barely peeks out for months. Temperatures regularly dip below -30. Food's not just scarce, it's dangerous. You want meat? You'd better be faster, smarter, or more cooperative than a herd of stampeding prehistoric bison. Fire? Fire was life. But don't imagine flicking a lighter. Think flint, steel, fungus, and endless patience. They struck rocks, used dried fungi to catch a spark, and built fires that couldn't go out, because if they did, everyone might be dead by morning. Some groups carried smouldering embers between camps. That's how vital fire was. It warmed bones, cooked meat, warded off predators, and gave the Ice Age its first nightlife. You think making s'mores is rustic? Try lighting wet tinder in sub-zero wind, with fingers already half-numb from cold. Fail and there's no backup, no shelter, just dark, predators and death. And yet, somehow, it worked. These early humans didn't just endure, they began mastering their environment. Slowly, brilliantly, brutally. Because fire was just the beginning. The question now is, what did they eat to keep those fires burning and their blood moving? Woolly mammoth steaks? Sure, but that's just scratching the frostbitten surface. Eating in the Ice Age wasn't about cravings, it was about not dying. No spice racks, no cooking shows, just whatever you could hunt, trap, scavenge, or dig up without freezing or getting gored. Mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, giant elk. These weren't majestic photo ops, they were walking refrigerators with tusks. But hunting one, it was like trying to take down a semi-truck using sticks and courage. You couldn't solo it, you needed a crew, coordination, strategy, a team that knew how to bait, drive, and ambush a multi-ton beast into a trap or over a cliff. This is where early humans leveled up. They didn't just throw spears, they planned. They communicated. They invented the group hunt. You and your buddies weren't just running at the mammoth, you were cornering it, cutting off escape routes, maybe even herding it into a natural ravine where gravity did the dirty work. And if you pulled it off, jackpot. One mammoth could feed an entire group for weeks, bones for tools, hide for tents, intestines for ropes, fat for burning. They didn't waste a single scrap. In the Ice Age, every part of the animal had a purpose, like prehistoric zero waste, living, only with a side of danger. But let's be real, not every day came with a giant carcass buffet. Most days, survival meant scavenging. Roots, nuts, berries, when not buried under 3 feet of snow. Eggs, insects. Small game. Humans were relentless omnivores. If it had calories, it was dinner. And yes, they ate raw when they had to. Frozen meat, basically nature's jerky. You don't wait for defrost when your metabolism is running like a furnace just to keep warm. You eat what's edible, and you do it fast. Then there's the real MVP of Ice Age fuel, fat. Glorious, greasy, caloric fat. Your body needed it to survive the cold. Lean meat alone could kill you, literally. It's called protein poisoning. Without fat or carbs, your body starts to crash. So humans hunted with a nutrition plan. They wanted blubber, marrow, organs, things modern diets fear, but Ice Age bodies craved. And let's talk preservation. With no fridges, they got clever. Snow pits became freezers. Smoke cured meat. Ice-cold streams were nature's pantry. Ever see a Neanderthal with a vacuum sealer? Number. But you do see them dragging a quarter-ton of meat into a frozen cave, where bacteria went on strike from the cold. Eating wasn't just about finding food, it was a calculated survival strategy. You couldn't miss a meal. You couldn't waste energy. Everything had to count, and it did. So they hunted smarter, scavenged harder, and turned every kill into 1,000 tools, threads, and meals. But feeding the body was only half the battle. What about staying warm? How do you not freeze solid when your bed is the dirt and your roof is nothing? So, fire, mastered. Food, hunted, scavenged, consumed with brutal efficiency. But here's the next existential question for the average Ice Age human. What do you wear when the world is actively trying to freeze you solid? You can't just wrap yourself in leaves and call it a day. You needed real insulation. Enter animal fashion, the kind that made Peter wake up screaming in the middle of the night. Because Ice Age clothing wasn't cute. It was survival stitched together with sinew and stained with blood. First rule of Ice Age couture? Layers. Not one mammoth pelt, but several. Tunics, cloaks, leggings, mittens, yes, mittens. Archaeologists have even found evidence of fur-lined hoods tailored to trap body heat like a thermos. Some Ice Age tribes lined garments with grass for extra padding. Others used snowshoe-like footwear made of hide and bark strips to avoid frostbitten toes. But here's the kicker: they sewed. Not crudely tied pelts, sewn with fine needles made from bone, and thread spun from sinew or tendon. If your image of a caveman is someone grunting in a single loincloth, update that mental picture. These people knew tailoring better than most modern Instagram influencers. Neanderthals, often portrayed as the clumsy cousins in the human family tree, were especially good at this. There's growing evidence that they layered clothing strategically and even used pigment, yes, style, to decorate or distinguish themselves. They weren't just surviving, they were making it fashion. And then comes shelter. Caves are the Ice Age cliché, and sure, they used them. But caves aren't exactly in abundance when you're a mobile hunter-gatherer group. Most of the time, people built shelters from whatever was around: mammoth bones, wood, snow. They made tents draped in hide, lashed together with gut strings, insulated with moss, lined with fur. Picture an igloo crossed with a meat locker, and you're close. Cozy? Not exactly. Warm? Warm enough not to die, and sometimes that's a luxury. Now, what do you do in the dark months, when even the animals disappear and the snow never stops falling? This is where community came in. Ice Age humans weren't just survivalists, they were social creatures. You huddled with your group, not just for warmth, but for morale. You shared stories, songs, myths. Fire became the center of culture, not just cooking. Around the flames, you passed down knowledge. How to track prey, when to migrate, where to find flint. That oral tradition, it's not fluff. It's the reason you're here, watching a video about them 20,000 years later. And that brings us to the mind, because the real superpower Ice Age humans had wasn't fire or fashion or even weapons. It was imagination, cognitive flexibility, the ability to plan for things that didn't exist yet. If we move south before the snow hits, if we store meat here, it'll last longer. If we teach the kids how to make snares, we'll have food next season. This is what separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom, not thumbs, not walking upright, but the ability to anticipate the future and shape it. And no one did that better than Ice Age humans. They crafted tools from stone so finely chipped that modern experimental archaeologists have trouble replicating them. They etched markings into bones, early calendars, hunting records. We don't even fully know, but those marks show long-term thinking, symbolism, abstraction, the roots of art and science blooming in a frozen world. And yes, they made art. Cave paintings deep in dark limestone chambers where no light reached naturally. Bulls, lions, deer, mammoths, handprints. Some in vivid ochre reds and blacks, others etched into stone. These weren't doodles, they were deliberate, sacred, possibly magical. Imagine crawling half a mile into total darkness, carrying a stone lamp fueled by animal fat, just to paint a bison on the wall. That's not graffiti, that's a worldview, a belief system, a culture. And it's here we see the full picture. Ice Age humans weren't mindless brutes just hanging on, they were artists, inventors, philosophers, survivors with a spiritual side. They stared death in the face and responded with creativity. But survival isn't just about what's outside you, it's also about who you're surviving with. So let's talk about the social dynamics. Who led? How did decisions get made? What did family look like when your next meal involved stabbing something with tusks? Because Ice Age life wasn't solo hero mode, it was cooperative, tribal, and, brace yourself, possibly more gender balanced than many societies today. And that's exactly where we're headed next. Let's crack open the myth of the lone, grunting caveman, a hairy brute dragging a club with one hand and a silent wife with the other. It's cartoon nonsense. Real Ice Age humans didn't just survive because they were tough, they survived because they worked together, and they did it in surprisingly sophisticated ways. Tribal life was essential. No individual could outlast a glacier solo. You needed others to hunt, share fire, raise children, and defend territory. We're talking tightly knit groups, bands of maybe 20 to 50 people, roaming together, linked by blood, alliance, and necessity. And within these groups, division of labor wasn't just practical, it was life-saving. Now here's the twist. The old man the hunter, woman the gatherer trope. It's not the full story. Recent archaeological evidence is upending that neat little binary. Graves from Ice Age sites have revealed female skeletons buried with hunting tools, spears, knives, even projectile points, not ceremonial objects, tools of the trade. Turns out, Ice Age women were likely active participants in the hunt. Not all of them, and not all the time, but enough to make anthropologists rethink a century of assumptions. In survival situations, everyone contributes where they can. If you're fast, strategic, and know how to track a herd, you hunt, gender be damned. Gathering, meanwhile, wasn't some passive backup plan. It required deep botanical knowledge, seasonal tracking, and foraging skills that meant the difference between full bellies and famine. In many environments, plants and small animals contributed more calories than the big hunts. So yeah, everyone pulled their weight. Now, leadership. Ice Age societies didn't have pharaohs or kings, no thrones made of bones, no ice palaces. Instead, leadership was likely situational. Got a hunting trip, the best tracker leads. Need to resolve a dispute? Maybe the elder with the best memory steps in. This was the original meritocracy, fluid roles based on skill, not inheritance. But that doesn't mean things were all hugs and mammoth stew. Tensions happened. Competition for mates, resources, prestige. It's human nature. The difference? Without rigid hierarchies or written laws, conflict resolution had to be direct and personal. Social bonds were everything, and exile could be a death sentence. You tick off your group, you're out in the snow, alone, with wolves. Problem solved. And speaking of wolves, here's where things get really interesting. Because somewhere during the Ice Age, humans made a pact that changed history. They allied with another apex predator, one with sharp teeth, keen senses, and a love of meat, the ancestor of the domestic dog. We don't know the exact moment it happened, but the evidence is mounting. Around 30,000 years ago, wolves and humans started circling each other, maybe scavenging from the same kills, maybe tracking prey in parallel, and then maybe sharing a fire, a scrap of meat, a bond. The earliest confirmed dog burial is over 14,000 years old, laid to rest beside a human with signs of care. Not just a tool, a companion. Think about that. In a world of constant danger, humans formed the first interspecies alliance in history. They didn't tame wolves overnight. It took generations, selecting the friendliest, the most loyal, the least likely to bite your face off in your sleep. But in time, they co-evolved with us. Dogs helped us hunt, alerted us to threats, even kept us warm. In return, they got food, shelter, and protection. A mutual survival deal with fur and teeth. And it worked. The human-dog partnership may have helped give our ancestors a critical edge. Early warning systems, boosted hunting success, enhanced security while sleeping. Dogs weren't just pets, they were teammates. Which brings us to a big point. Survival in the Ice Age wasn't about being the strongest. It was about being the most adaptable, the best collaborator, the cleverest strategist. You can't muscle your way through a -40-degree winter. You have to outthink it. And that adaptability, it showed up in everything. Weapons weren't one size fits all. They adapted to the prey, the climate, the materials on hand. In some areas, humans used atlatls, spear throwers that launched projectiles with deadly force. In others, they relied on hand axes, bolas, or nets. Toolkits were modular, portable, ever-evolving. The Swiss Army knife of the Pleistocene era. Homes shifted too. No wood nearby? Use mammoth bones, too cold for tents. Dig snow shelters, too exposed. Camp near cliffs. Every environment required a different answer, and they found them again and again. And still they dreamed, still they painted, still they sang. Because even with death at the doorstep, early humans never lost their drive to express. It's what kept them sane, kept them bonded, gave them meaning. Now here's the kicker. All of this, everything we've talked about so far, is just the foundation. Because next we go deeper. We're diving into migration, how Ice Age humans spread across continents, crossed land bridges, and rewrote the story of exploration before boats or maps even existed. Say the word, and we head into the wind-swept frontiers of ancient human expansion, where every step was a gamble and every new land a test of human will. Let's talk movement, because Ice Age humans didn't just stick to one patch of frozen dirt. They spread out, far, fast, and with no maps, no wheels, no beasts of burden, just 2 feet, a gut feeling, and a stubborn refusal to stay put. So how did early humans, without cities, compasses, or even the written word, manage to colonize almost the entire globe during an ice age? Simple. They followed the food, the weather, and probably a hunch. A glacier creeps in, you creep out. Herds migrate? You follow. Rivers freeze, cross them. Hunger is the original GPS. Now here's the mind blower. Around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, a small band of humans left Africa. They didn't know they were launching the most epic road trip in species history. They were just looking for better odds. That journey eventually led them to the Middle East, into Europe, across Asia, and, wait for it, all the way to Australia, by foot. In a world filled with things that wanted to eat you. And then there's the big leap. North America. During the last ice age, sea levels dropped over 300 feet, exposing a land bridge between Siberia and Alaska, Beringia. It wasn't a bridge like you'd imagine. It was a vast, icy corridor stretching hundreds of miles wide, tundra, steppe, and cold winds for days. Sometime between 15,000 and 20,000 years ago, humans crossed that land bridge. They didn't know it, but they were becoming the first Americans. And they didn't stop at Alaska. They kept moving south through ice-free corridors along the coastlines into forests and deserts and eventually to the tip of South America. Think about that. From snow-choked Siberia to Patagonia, on foot, in animal skins with stone tools. That's exploration at a level we can barely comprehend today. No reservations, no backup plan, just raw courage and endless curiosity. Now here's the kicker. They didn't just arrive, they adapted fast. In the frozen north, they became masters of snow and ice. In the rainforests, they learned to track silent prey and avoid venomous plants. In the mountains, they carved paths, made fire at altitude, and endured the thin air. Every ecosystem became a new classroom, and early humans were quick learners. They shaped the land too, burned forests to flush out game, dug pits to trap animals, built fishing weirs. Humanity wasn't just surviving nature, they were beginning to bend it. And with movement came diversity. Different groups evolved different languages, customs, technologies. The humans in Ice Age Europe developed bone flutes and elaborate burials. The ones in Siberia perfected needlework and reindeer herding. Those in Australia passed down Dreamtime stories that still echo today. But no matter where they went, they carried one constant: their brains. That wrinkled 3-pound organ was their ultimate survival tool. It let them adapt not just physically, but culturally. And that, more than muscle or fur or fire, is why they didn't go extinct. Because, spoiler alert, they weren't the only humans around. During much of the Ice Age, our ancestors shared the planet with other hominins, Neanderthals in Europe and parts of Asia, Denisovans in the East, even some mysterious shadow species we barely have names for. And what did Homo sapiens do? They met them, they fought them, they bred with them. Today, if you're not 100% African in ancestry, chances are you've got a little Neanderthal DNA quietly riding shotgun in your genome. And if you've got some Asian or oceanic ancestry, you probably have a smidge of Denisovan in there too. It wasn't just war, it was cultural exchange, genetic fusion, a prehistoric melting pot happening under woolly mammoth skies. But slowly, Homo sapiens became the last human species standing. Why? Maybe it was our brains, our ability to adapt language, technology, teamwork. Maybe it was dumb luck. Maybe it was infectious disease. Or maybe, just maybe, it was that killer combo of cooperation and creativity that let us outlast everyone else. By the end of the last Ice Age, roughly 11,700 years ago, humans had spread across 6 continents, invented dozens of survival strategies, and outlived every other hominin on Earth. And then, the glaciers began to retreat. What followed was the dawn of a new age: warmer weather, more stable climates, and eventually farming, cities, and civilization. But make no mistake, the foundation of all that future glory was built in the ice. And we're not done yet, because before we wrap up this frozen epic, there's still one more layer to uncover: the spiritual world. The myths, the rituals, the beliefs that helped Ice Age people make sense of a life filled with danger, death, and awe. Let's dim the lights and step into the flickering firelight of ancient ritual, because for all their hunting, stitching, freezing, and foraging, Ice Age humans weren't just brutes with spears. They were thinkers, dreamers, believers. When the world is raw, brutal, and mostly trying to kill you, you start asking questions. Why does the sun vanish in winter? Where do people go when they die? Why did the mammoths disappear? The answers weren't scientific, but they were powerful, and they came in the form of myth. We'll never know the exact words, but the clues they left behind are tantalizing. Picture a dark cave, deep in the earth, no natural light, nothing lives there. But go far enough in, and you'll find art, paintings, carvings, shapes of animals, figures of hunters, abstract signs, handprints, some adult, some childlike. Thousands of years old, yet still eerily fresh. Someone crawled into the belly of the earth, lit a flickering lamp, and began to tell a story in color and shadow. These weren't idle doodles, they were acts of reverence, ritual, perhaps even magic. The Lascaux and Chauvet caves in France, the Altamira cave in Spain, and others like them were sanctuaries, sacred theaters for Ice Age spirituality. Maybe the hunt wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. Paint the bison to summon it, draw the hunt to ensure its success, leave a handprint as a mark of being, of presence, of I was here, I mattered. And this spiritual depth went beyond walls. Burial sites from the Ice Age tell stories of respect, grief, and belief in something beyond. Graves show bodies laid carefully, often with grave goods, tools, beads, ochre, even flowers. In Sungir, Russia, 2 Ice Age children were buried with over 10,000 ivory beads, spears, and decorated clothing. The craftsmanship took thousands of hours, far more than would be practical. It was symbolic, emotional, religious. Why go through all that trouble for the dead unless you believed they were going somewhere? Some theorize that Ice Age people had animistic beliefs where animals, rivers, rocks, even the wind had spirits. You don't just kill a mammoth, you negotiate with its spirit. You honor it. You ask its forgiveness. Others suggest early humans believed in ancestors watching from beyond, guiding their clans through dreams and signs. Shamanistic practices may have emerged, individuals who entered altered states through dance, chant, or hallucinogenic herbs, acting as bridges between the living and the unseen world. Even today, indigenous traditions around the world, descended from those Ice Age roots, still echo those same ideas: spirit animals, sacred landscapes, storytelling as moral compass. Let's not forget music. We've found flutes made from bird bones and mammoth ivory dating back 40,000 years. Let that sink in. While dodging saber-toothed tigers and skinning elk, someone thought, you know what this moment needs? A melody. Music wasn't just for fun, it was community glue. Rhythms around the fire. Chants during the hunt. Lullabies to calm infants while predators howled outside. Music and ritual were emotional tools, just as vital as the spear. Now, fast forward. As the Ice Age waned, so did some of its magic. Glaciers retreated, megafauna died off, and human groups began to settle more permanently. Spiritual practices evolved. The gods became more abstract, rituals more complex. But the roots stayed deep. The awe of nature, the reverence for the hunt, the grief of loss, the celebration of survival. These weren't extras, they were essential to the human experience. Because what separates humans from animals isn't just tools or language or brain size, it's our ability to imagine something beyond. To make meaning from chaos. To sing in the cold and dance in the dark. And if you think that's fluff, think again. That meaning-making, that symbolic thought, that's the very foundation of everything we call culture today. Now it's time to shift gears. We've seen how Ice Age humans survived, adapted, traveled, and believed. But there's one last element of the story that ties it all together: the legacy. What did they leave behind besides bones and cave art? What ideas, inventions, and instincts are still with us today? Because here's the real punchline of the Ice Age. We didn't just crawl out of it, we carried it with us. In our myths, in our fears, in our wiring. Let's talk legacy. The Ice Age didn't just end, it melted slowly into memory, but that memory, it carved grooves deep into our DNA, and you, yes, you, are still carrying the echoes. First, your brain. Ever wonder why humans are so alert to threats, why we jump at shadows or instinctively scan crowds for danger? That's Ice Age wiring. For tens of thousands of years, your survival depended on hypervigilance. That rustling bush could have been a lion. That strange noise in the dark, possibly a rival tribe. Or worse, nothing at all, which made it even scarier. Your ancestors didn't have the luxury of brushing off anxiety. Paranoia kept them alive. And today, that same system that once scanned for wolves now freaks out over unanswered texts and awkward social encounters. Same brain, different jungle. Now consider your body. Ever notice how we store fat like it's going out of style? That's not just bad snacking habits, it's ancient programming. In the Ice Age, feast was rare, and famine was real. If your body could squirrel away calories as fat, you had an edge. That edge now means your metabolism treats a donut like a life raft. And sleep? Ice Age nights were long, cold, and dangerous. Light was scarce, predators weren't. So humans learned to be light sleepers, to wake up at the snap of a twig. The whole "I can't sleep when I travel" phenomenon? That's your Ice Age brain not trusting unfamiliar surroundings. Even our social instincts, our need to belong to a group, to be accepted, to avoid shame, come from those early days. Back then, exile was a death sentence. Alone meant dead. So we evolved to be tribal, to care deeply about reputation, to feel pain when we're excluded. Modern shame spirals, that's your primal survival alarm, slightly miscalibrated for the 21st century. But the Ice Age didn't just shape your fears, it shaped your imagination. Those early humans invented storytelling, not just to entertain, but to teach, to warn, to bind communities together. Every tale around the fire was a survival manual, which plants to eat, which animals to fear, how to cross the mountains, who betrayed whom during the last hunt. And those stories? They got bigger. They turned into legends, religions, cosmologies. That's the through line, from mammoth hunts to Marvel movies, different scale. Same ancient function. We also owe our toolkit to the Ice Age innovators, the bone needle, the sewing thread, the fish hook, the snowshoe, the stone blade so finely chipped it makes modern flint knappers weep. These weren't hacks, they were revolutions. Tiny technologies that made life possible in a world colder than our nightmares. Even shelter design traces its roots to that era. Portable tents, wind barriers, communal hearths, basic elements of architecture were born when frostbite was the default setting. And let's not forget cooperation. If you've ever worked in a team, shared a meal, played a game, or organized a road trip, you're reenacting Ice Age logistics. Back then, everything was group-based. The hunt, the move, the survival strategy, no one thrived alone. That instinct to collaborate, to synchronize, to plan ahead, that's pure Ice Age brilliance. Our ancestors survived because they didn't just adapt individually, they adapted together. Now, fast forward. Modern life may be warm, bright, and convenient, but the Ice Age still whispers beneath the surface, in our fears, our hopes, our stories, our instincts. It's why we huddle around campfires, even fake ones. Why we stare into the dark and feel awe. Why we invent gods, sing songs, crave meaning. It's all still there. The Ice Age wasn't just a period in time, it was the crucible that forged humanity. It tested every weakness, sharpened every strength, and asked one brutal, repeated question: can you endure? And the answer was yes. We didn't just endure, we innovated, we connected, we dreamed, and we kept going. From frostbitten caves to high-rises, from spear tips to satellites, we've been on one long journey out of the cold. But no matter how far we go, no matter how warm and artificial our world becomes, we still carry the echo of that frozen fight for survival. And that's where we're headed next, because to truly understand the Ice Age story, we need to step into the final chapter, the grand exit, how it ended, why it mattered, and how the melting of glaciers triggered the dawn of everything we now call civilization. The Ice Age didn't end with a bang, it ended with a drip. Picture this: glaciers the size of continents slowly surrendering, melting, cracking, rivers swelling, seas rising. The planet was changing, not overnight, but rapidly enough that human life had to shift again, dramatically. Around 11,700 years ago, the Earth slipped into a new epoch, the Holocene. That's the warm, relatively stable climate we've been enjoying ever since. But the transition, it was chaos. First came the floods. As ice sheets collapsed, they released unimaginable volumes of water. Whole landscapes drowned, low-lying coastlines disappeared, rivers changed direction, lakes overflowed. What was once tundra became marsh. And the weather, unpredictable, violent, volatile. For Ice Age humans, who had spent tens of thousands of years mastering cold climates, this was the ultimate curveball. Megafauna, mammoths, mastodons, giant sloths, started vanishing. Some died off as their habitats shrank. Others couldn't adapt to the warming climate. And yes, humans may have helped speed up the extinction with overhunting. When you've hunted mammoth for generations and now they're gone, you have to reinvent your entire diet. So they did. Humans began experimenting with new food sources. They widened their nets, literally and figuratively. Fish, shellfish, birds, nuts, seeds, anything that could be caught or cultivated got attention. And slowly, something radical began: the domestication of plants and animals. Think about that. For 2.5 million years, we'd been hunters and gatherers, mobile, adaptable, dependent on the land. But post-Ice Age, we started staying put, taming nature, making it work for us. The first farmers didn't look like today's agriculturalists. They were cautious innovators, gathering wild wheat, figuring out when it sprouted best, how to store seeds, how to protect crops. The Fertile Crescent, modern-day Iraq, Syria, Turkey, became a cradle for this quiet revolution. Around the same time, humans began domesticating animals. Dogs, of course, had already joined the pack, but now came sheep, goats, pigs. Herds replaced herds. Instead of chasing prey, we started raising it. And with food, security came the unthinkable. Permanence. Villages, then towns, then cities. Agriculture allowed surplus. Surplus allowed storage. Storage allowed trade. And trade birthed writing, money, bureaucracy. The gears of civilization began turning. But here's the kicker. None of this would have happened without the Ice Age. The challenges of the Pleistocene shaped us into flexible, inventive survivors. When the cold withdrew, we didn't just breathe easy, we leveled up. All the tools, social systems, cognitive flexibility, all got applied to a brand new world. And it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about shaping the environment, building monuments, organizing religions, developing political systems, inventing math to track crops, creating calendars to understand seasons. The Ice Age gave us the raw materials, stone tools, fire, clothing, community. The Holocene gave us the time and stability to build something more. But even as we built pyramids and temples, we remembered. Myths of great floods echo in cultures around the world. Could they be distorted memories of glacial melt and rising seas? Possibly. Ancient stories of golden ages ending, of people wandering from frozen homelands they might trace back to that final thaw. And even now we instinctively respect the cold. We wrap in blankets, we light fires, we hibernate through winter holidays. Deep down, something ancient still whispers, stay warm, stay close, watch the skies. Because long before we built towers, we huddled in caves. And the memory of that ice, of that struggle, is still in our bones. But wait, there's one last twist. We've left the Ice Age behind, yes, but climate? It's always shifting. And in our modern age, we're not just reacting to climate change, we're causing it. The glaciers we once feared, they're melting again. Sea levels are rising. Ecosystems are wobbling. The lessons of the past are knocking at the door. So here's the haunting irony. The same ingenuity that got us through the Ice Age, our tools, our fire, our drive to reshape the Earth, now threatens to undo the balance we finally achieved. But there's hope in that too, because if we could survive the Ice Age with nothing but stone blades and shared fire, imagine what we could do now with all our tech, knowledge, and global reach, if we really tried. The story of how cavemen survived the Ice Age isn't just history. It's a blueprint, a reminder of human resilience, creativity, and grit. And it's a challenge, because now it's our turn to adapt, to survive what's coming, to carry the fire forward, not just through the cold, but through the heat. Let's rewind, not to the beginning, but to something that's often skipped over: childhood in the Ice Age. We talk about hunters and gatherers, mammoth chases and fire-starting techniques. But what about the little ones? How did kids survive in a world where stepping too far from camp could mean frostbite, predators, or getting lost in a blizzard? Spoiler, very carefully and communally, Ice Age children weren't shielded from survival. They were apprentices from the moment they could crawl. Childhood wasn't a vacation from reality, it was a fast-track training program. You learned to make fire before you learned to talk properly. By age 4 or 5, you could probably identify edible roots, sharpen tools, and avoid the animal that killed your cousin last winter. And here's something fascinating. Play wasn't just tolerated, it was encouraged. Because in Ice Age life, play was preparation. You weren't building with blocks, you were flinging mini-spears, practicing tracking skills, role-playing a hunt. You mimicked the adults not for fun, but because your life might soon depend on it. And the group raised you, not just mom and dad. These were tight-knit communities where aunties, uncles, grandparents, and older siblings were all part of your daily instruction. It takes a village wasn't a philosophy, it was reality. Children also had a front-row seat to tradition. They heard stories at night by the fire, stories that carried survival lessons, moral codes, warnings. Those stories? Sticky. They had rhythm, repetition, characters, drama, because good storytelling equals good memory, retention equals not dying. And those cave paintings? Some handprints are clearly from children. Kids were in the ritual spaces, part of the culture. Not sidelined, involved. Now let's pivot, because where there are kids, there are families. And Ice Age families? Not nuclear, not patriarchal in the modern sense, and definitely not static. Family structures were fluid. Marriages weren't legal contracts, they were social agreements. Partnerships might be lifelong or shift with seasons. Child-rearing was shared. Paternity? Often a fuzzy detail. What mattered was the group, not the DNA. In fact, some anthropologists suggest that early human societies were fiercely egalitarian. No one hoarded power. If you got bossy, the group mocked you, ganged up on you, or quietly ostracized you. Resource sharing wasn't charity, it was insurance. Help others now, and they'll help you when the mammoth flips your sled. Compare that to modern hyper-individualism, and it's humbling. We think we're advanced, but Ice Age people figured out social balance in ways we're still fumbling toward. But survival wasn't just about cooperation, it was also about precision, especially in crafting tools. Let's take a detour into the Ice Age workshop. We're talking stone napping so refined it makes modern engineers pause, tiny pressure flaking to shape razor-sharp edges, symmetrical points designed for aerodynamic flight, hafting techniques to bind stone tips to wooden shafts using glue made from boiled hooves or birch pitch. This wasn't slapdash, it was skilled labor passed down across generations, apprentices learned by watching, then doing. A single misstep meant a useless spear and maybe a missed meal. Quality control was a matter of life and death, and the diversity of tools is mind-blowing. Needles, scrapers, awls, hooks, hammers, blades, all customized to specific materials: bone, hide, wood, sinew. Each one part of a survival toolkit more complex than most modern camping gear. And they weren't just functional, they were beautiful. Etched with lines, decorated with patterns. Even utility had aesthetic. Because when life is harsh, beauty becomes a kind of resistance. A declaration. We're not just surviving, we're living. And that brings us to another rarely discussed chapter, emotion. What did Ice Age people feel? We imagine them as stoic, hard-bitten, emotionally muted. But the evidence says otherwise. They mourned, they celebrated, they remembered. Burial sites show care, not just disposal. Some bodies were placed in fetal positions, maybe to symbolize rebirth. Others were dusted in red ochre, possibly to represent blood, life, spirit. Grave goods were thoughtful, personalized. That's not apathy, that's deep emotional intelligence. And think about it. These people faced loss constantly. Children died young, friends didn't come back from hunts. Weather could snuff out whole families. You don't endure that kind of pain without developing rituals to cope. And when they loved hard. Partnerships weren't legally binding, but bonds were fierce. You depended on each other completely. Trust wasn't casual, it was everything. So yes, they felt grief, love, pride, fear. Their lives were shorter, but not smaller. And that brings us to a strange truth. In many ways, Ice Age humans were more mentally present than we are today. No distraction. No noise, just life, raw and real. Every step, every fire, every bite of food mattered. Every moment demanded your attention. And that's not just inspiring, it's grounding. So you've got fire, spears, clothing, and killer instincts, But don't assume the Ice Age was all brute force and bison guts. No, our ancestors were tinkerers, pioneers, engineers with a flair for field-tested design and the kind of ingenuity that would make MacGyver nod in respect. Let's start with glue. Yeah, glue. Ice Age humans created adhesives long before anyone wrote instructions on a bottle. Need to fasten a stone blade to a wooden shaft? You'd need birch bark pitch. To get it, you had to heat birch bark slowly in an oxygen-free environment, distilling a sticky black tar that could hold a tool together through snowstorms and saber-tooth ambushes. That's chemistry, real, complex chemistry, trial and error learning passed down over generations, without goggles or lab coats. And let's talk about medicine. You think natural remedies are a modern trend? Ice Age humans were already experimenting with plants for healing thousands of years ago. Traces of yarrow and chamomile, both with medicinal properties, have been found in Neanderthal burial sites, not food plants, medicinal. That means they understood pain, illness, infection, and they didn't just tough it out, they tried to treat it. They also knew how to deal with wounds. There's evidence they used moss as bandages, honey as an antiseptic, and even bark poultices to reduce swelling. Splints made from animal bones or sticks held broken limbs in place. In some cases, people survived traumatic injuries for years because others helped them heal. And here's the wild one: surgery. There's archaeological evidence of trepanation, drilling or scraping a hole into the skull, going back nearly 10,000 years. Some skulls show signs of healing, meaning the patient survived. Why would they do it? Maybe to relieve pressure, treat head trauma, or for ritual reasons. Either way, Ice Age brain surgery, let that sink in. Now flip the focus from body to structure. We've touched on shelters before, but the full range of Ice Age architecture is staggering. In places where wood was scarce, people built with mammoth bones. In Ukraine and Russia, entire homes made from dozens of massive mammoth skulls, tusks, and ribs have been uncovered. They were arranged in circular or oval formations with central hearths, hide coverings, and possibly even insulation packed between layers. It wasn't just survival, it was craftsmanship. These weren't makeshift lean-tos, they were homes designed, maintained, repaired. Some were reused across generations. And then there's the mind-blowing realm of measurement. In the Blombos Cave in South Africa, ochre pieces engraved with crosshatch patterns suggest early humans understood symmetry, pattern, and maybe even counting over 70,000 years ago. These weren't just doodles, they were systematic, possibly calendars, possibly data. They imply a concept of time, rhythm, cycles. And guess what? That same concept shows up across continents. In Europe, notched bones might have tracked lunar phases. In North America, ancient petroglyphs align with solstices. All this before clocks, before numbers, before agriculture. The Ice Age wasn't a technological void, it was a time of intense experimentation. Humans had to observe, adapt, remember, and improve. You don't get second chances with faulty gear when your life depends on it. Even their hunting weapons evolved in ingenious ways. Take the atlatl, a spear thrower that extends the arm and launches projectiles farther, faster, and deadlier. It added mechanical advantage, multiplying force with a flick of the wrist. Modern tests show it could hurl a dart over 100 miles per hour. For context, that's baseball pitcher fast, with a stone tip. And then came the bow, simple, elegant, and revolutionary. A bow allowed for quieter, more accurate kills from a distance, transforming hunting strategy and combat forever. The first known bows date back at least 11,000 years, possibly earlier. And guess what? Some of those ancient bows were laminated, layered with different woods for strength and flexibility. Think prehistoric composites. And when it came to fishing, early humans were even more clever. They fashioned barbed hooks from bone and antler, wove nets from plant fibers, and built fish traps in rivers using rocks and clever channel designs. You think setting up a crab trap is hardcore? Try doing it in a glacier-fed stream with bare hands and zero visibility. The big takeaway? Ice Age humans weren't grunting oafs with rocks. They were scientists, engineers, field researchers. Every tool was tested, every strategy refined, every innovation came with stakes: your life, your clan, your future. So the next time you flick on a lighter, pop a painkiller, or assemble some IKEA furniture, give a silent nod to your Ice Age ancestors. They paved the way with fire, bone, grit, and genius. Coming up next, let's step inside the psychological world of Ice Age humans. How did they handle stress, anxiety, fear? What did they do when grief struck, or when dreams turned to nightmares? Get ready to enter the mind of our ancient kin, because survival wasn't just physical, it was deeply emotional. And they had strategies we're only just beginning to rediscover. So you've hunted the mammoth, built the shelter, and patched up your wounded leg with pine resin and moss. Congratulations, you're physically surviving the Ice Age. But now comes the harder part, surviving in your own head, because Ice Age humans weren't just reacting to hunger or cold, they were carrying the full emotional weight of their brutal world, and they didn't have therapists, hot tea, or mindfulness apps to help them cope. So how did they do it? First, let's lay it out plain. Their lives were extremely stressful. The threats were relentless: predators, starvation, injury, illness, exile, grief. You could lose a child to a cold snap, watch a friend fall through river ice, return to camp to find your food, stash raided, and your fire out. The stress levels off the charts, and yet they endured. How? Through ritual, community, and symbolism. Let's start with ritual. When things are uncertain, like, say, whether the sky will ever stop snowing, humans instinctively seek patterns. Rituals give structure, a way to assert control over the uncontrollable. Before hunts, Ice Age people likely performed rites, gestures, chants, dances, or even offerings to animal spirits. These weren't just for show. They focused the mind, bonded the group, lowered anxiety. We've done the ritual, we're ready. Think of it as prehistoric sports psychology: visualization, intention, group alignment. Ritual gave emotional preparedness when physical guarantees didn't exist. And when tragedy struck, grief rituals stepped in. Burial practices, careful placements, grave goods, pigment, adornment suggest more than disposal. They suggest emotional closure, a belief that the dead still mattered, that they'd gone somewhere, that their memory lived on. Sound familiar? Funerals today serve the same emotional purpose. It's a continuity thousands of years old. Then there's storytelling, the glue of Ice Age psychology. You didn't write down your fears, you spoke them into fables. Mythology became a way to make sense of pain, of randomness, of the inexplicable. A bad hunting season wasn't just bad luck. It was a test from the spirits, a sign from the ancestors, or the doing of some trickster being in the woods. These narratives weren't childish. They were emotional frameworks. They turned chaos into story, gave structure to fear. They made you believe you could endure because others, mythical or real, had done it before. Then comes dream work. You think only modern people analyze dreams. Think again. In tribal societies across the globe, many descended from Ice Age ancestors, dreams have long been seen as messages, warnings, prophecies, or insights from the spirit world. Imagine a Neanderthal shaman interpreting someone's nightmare about a black wolf. Maybe it's a sign to avoid a certain hunting trail. Maybe it's a story in the making. But the point is this: dreams mattered. The subconscious wasn't a mystery, it was a messenger. Now let's talk community, the ultimate mental health system. When you live and sleep with the same 20 to 40 people your entire life, emotional isolation isn't an option. If you're in pain, everyone knows. If you're afraid, others notice. That tight bond meant that emotional support was baked into daily life. You laughed together, grieved together, survived together. There were no silent battles with depression or anxiety in a vacuum. You might not have had a word for trauma, but you had shared stories, shared songs, shared struggle. You saw each other. Compare that to now, hyper-connected online, emotionally disconnected offline. Maybe those Ice Age bonds were healthier than we think. And then there's art, another ancient pressure valve. Cave paintings, carvings, music, these weren't hobbies, they were emotional outlets. When language couldn't express grief or fear or awe, art stepped in. That painting of a charging bison on a dark cave wall, it's adrenaline, fear, admiration, all poured into pigment and line, therapy in charcoal. Let's not forget humor either. Yes, Ice Age. People laughed. Probably more than we assume. Humor lightens fear, diffuses tension. Bonds groups when the fire's low and you're snowed in with flatulence from half-frozen mammoth meat. Someone definitely cracked a joke. Survival doesn't preclude laughter, it demands it. So what's the big takeaway? Ice Age humans weren't emotionally stunted cavemen. They were psychologically resilient. They felt deeply, feared deeply, grieved profoundly, but they also laughed, bonded, imagined, and healed together. They crafted the first emotional survival strategies, and many of them still echo in us today. Modern psychology is rediscovering what they knew intuitively, that rituals, community, stories, art, and laughter are more powerful than we give them credit for. They help us face the dark, not by denying it, but by naming it, shaping it, singing through it. So yes, Ice Age people had tools. But their most powerful tool? The human spirit, hardened by frost and lifted by firelight. Next up, let's map the ultimate what if. What if the Ice Age never ended? What if megafauna survived? How would our species have evolved differently in a never-ending winter? Brace yourself for a deep freeze of alternate history, survival mode. Let's break the laws of history for a second, crack open a parallel timeline. Imagine a world where the Ice Age never ended. No melting glaciers, no burst of agriculture, no green revolution, just snow forever. Welcome to the alternate Earth. Pleistocene eternal. First off, say goodbye to modern civilization. No farms, no cities, no iPhones, no Netflix. Civilization depends on stable climates, reliable seasons, and an environment mild enough to grow food without it dying from frostbite. In a permanent ice age, humans remain nomadic forever. We chase migrating herds, not commuter trains. Our diet stays protein-heavy. Fat becomes currency. Carbs? A seasonal luxury at best. Kale smoothies don't make the cut. And technology? It evolves, but along a different track. Instead of tractors and plows, we refine our hunting tech, ultralight atlatls, composite bows made from mammoth sinew and Arctic pine, clothing woven from spun tendon and Arctic hair fur, layered for insulation like high-end performance gear. Our shelters evolve too, not skyscrapers, but hyper-insulated snow domes reinforced with bone, bark, and leather. Picture Inuit architecture on steroids. Entire villages semi-submerged in hillsides to retain warmth with smoke chimneys and built-in animal-proof storage caches. Religion? Even colder. In this forever frozen world, sun gods are minor deities. The big ones are frost giants, storm spirits, and glacier mothers. Fire becomes sacred, even divine. The act of lighting it is a ritual, half science, half miracle. And art? It thrives but stays dark. Shadows of predators, spirals carved in ice blocks, stories etched into bone, music turns from flute melodies to rhythmic chants, part ceremony, part group therapy, under a sky that never quite brightens. But now let's push further. How would we physically evolve? Give it 20,000 more years in the cold, and Homo sapiens might start looking a little less like us, and a little more like our Neanderthal cousins. Shorter limbs to conserve heat, broader noses to warm air, dense muscle mass, thick body hair making a comeback. Not quite Wookiee, but getting there. Skin tones remain pale in most regions, necessary to absorb vitamin D during the short, weak daylight hours. Eyes adjust too, larger irises, better night vision. We become creatures of twilight. Our society, less hierarchical, more communal. When nature's harsh and unpredictable, hoarding power doesn't work. You share or you freeze. Leadership stays fluid, based on survival skill and wisdom, not birthright or wealth. Status is earned, not inherited. Education? Oral, still. No time for scrolls or tablets. Instead, memory becomes our storage system. Elders aren't just respected, they're walking encyclopedias of survival hacks and spiritual wisdom. Children grow up reciting migration maps and weather patterns like sacred mantras. And gender roles, likely even more flexible. In a world this dangerous, you don't waste talent. If a woman throws better spears, she leads the hunt. If a man can forage like a master botanist, he feeds the tribe. Survival doesn't care about gender norms. Now let's zoom out. What does the Earth look like in a never-ending ice age? Glaciers still dominate North America, Europe, and Asia. Sea levels remain low, meaning land bridges stay exposed. Human groups migrate more freely between continents. Australia and Southeast Asia are one vast connected landmass. Japan is walkable. Britain is still tethered to mainland Europe. Biodiversity changes too. Animals stay huge and hairy. Mammoths rule the steppes. Cave lions, dire wolves, saber-toothed cats. Still apex predators. The ecosystems never reset. It's Pleistocene Park, forever open. Climate refugees become a global norm. Human bands move constantly, evading cold snaps, hunting routes, or predator pressure. The Arctic Circle isn't a no-man's land, it's just another hunting ground. Would we develop writing? Maybe, but it'd be slow. No permanent settlements means few records. Instead, we might have memory palaces, complex oral traditions encoded in song, dance, and ritual. Every chant carries history. Every posture maps a migration. And without agriculture, would we ever hit an industrial revolution? Unlikely. No grain surplus means no population boom. No boom means no factories. The steam engine doesn't happen. Oil never becomes king. The planet stays clean, but also humanity stays decentralized, scattered, tribal. Yet in this world we might be wiser. More in sync with the earth. More respectful of its cycles, because ignoring them means death. No delusions of dominion, just partnership with nature, forged over millennia of frost. And there's beauty in that. A slower pace, a deeper memory, a sense of connection most modern people lost with the first light bulb. But don't get too cozy in this alternate ice age, because next we're snapping back to reality, and we're digging into the weirdest, most controversial ideas floating around Ice Age studies. Ancient advanced civilizations, lost human species, Atlantis. Let's explore the speculative fringe, separating the fascinating from the flat-out fiction. Strap in, because this next part gets spicy. All right, let's get weird. Because while mainstream archaeology plays it safe with bones and carbon dates, the internet, and let's be honest, half your uncle's bookshelf, loves a good conspiracy. And when it comes to the Ice Age, the theories range from, interesting, to, okay, who let this guy near a microphone? Let's start with the all-time heavyweight, Atlantis. Plato described it around 360 BCE, an advanced civilization swallowed by the sea. Ever since, people have been pointing at maps, shouting, "It was here," with the conviction of a toddler playing hide-and-seek. But here's the twist. What if Atlantis, or something like it, did exist during the late Ice Age? During the last glacial maximum, sea levels were roughly 400 feet lower than today. Entire land masses were exposed, places we've barely explored with modern tech. So it's technically possible that complex coastal communities existed and were lost when the seas rose. Would that make them advanced? Not spaceship building, but maybe seafaring, trading, symbol-making cultures more sophisticated than we expect from 12,000 years ago. Any evidence? Bits and pieces. Underwater ruins off the coast of India, the Yonaguni Monument near Japan, submerged stone circles and tool sites in the North Sea. Most mainstream scientists say these are natural formations or later structures, but the timing does line up with post-Ice Age flooding. So while Atlantis probably isn't real, the concept of drowned civilizations? That's not totally outlandish. Next stop, Göbekli Tepe, the ancient temple complex in modern-day Turkey. It's 11,000 years old. That's older than Stonehenge, older than agriculture, built by people who were supposedly still chasing reindeer for breakfast. Massive T-shaped stone pillars carved with animals arranged in circles, no evidence of permanent housing, but serious ritual significance. How did Ice Age humans, fresh off the hunter-gatherer circuit, manage this level of organization? No one knows. It's made some scholars question whether spiritual or social revolutions preceded agriculture, not the other way around. Maybe gathering for ritual came first, and farming followed to feed the crowds. It flips the script on everything we thought about civilization. Now let's get a little more out there. Lost human species. We already know Homo sapiens weren't alone. There were Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo floresiensis, aka the Hobbit, Homo naledi, possibly more we haven't found, but some speculate that other intelligent hominins existed, and maybe even left traces in oral traditions and folklore. Myths of little people, wild forest dwellers, mountain hermits, they show up across cultures. Could some be distant memories of early human contact with other species? It's possible, not proven, but not absurd either. There's also the theory that Ice Age humans reached Antarctica before it froze. This one's fueled by the Piri Reis map, a 16th century chart that some claim shows the Antarctic coast without ice. Fringe theorists jump on it as evidence of ancient cartographers mapping pre-glacial landmasses. But let's pump the brakes. The map is probably just an artistic patchwork of older knowledge, not satellite-era precision. Still, it reveals a hunger we all share, to believe that humans were more than cold-bitten nomads with sticks, that they built, sailed, dreamed, maybe even remembered civilizations long forgotten. And finally, let's talk cosmic cataclysms. Some believe a comet or asteroid struck Earth around 12,800 years ago, triggering what's called the Younger Dryas, a sudden return to glacial conditions just as things were warming up. This theory suggests it wiped out megafauna, destabilized human cultures, and possibly erased any early civilizations. It's speculative, but gaining traction. Black mats of sediment, nanodiamonds, and weird geologic signatures around the world support the idea of a sudden, possibly cosmic impact. It wouldn't be the first time Earth got sucker-punched from space, so were there truly advanced Ice Age civilizations? If by advanced, you mean nuclear-powered pyramid builders? Number. But if you mean cultures with deep astronomical knowledge, complex spirituality, long-distance trade, and stone architecture, maybe. And if so, the end of the Ice Age could have buried that evidence under oceans, floods, and forests. Mainstream archaeology needs hard proof, but in the realm of Ice Age speculation, the line between myth and memory gets blurry. So what should we do with all this? Approach it with curiosity and skepticism. Keep the wonder, ditch the wild conclusions. Remember, the real Ice Age story is already jaw-dropping without aliens or lost empires. Humans endured the worst climate Earth threw at them, and somehow came out smarter, stronger, and weirder than ever. But before we close this chapter, let's circle back to the most important part of the story. You. Because your DNA, your fears, your instincts, they're not modern. They're Pleistocene echoes, and next we'll explore exactly what the Ice Age left behind inside you and how it still shapes your life, even now. Let's zoom in. Real close. Not on glaciers or mammoths, but on you. Your brain. Your habits. Your cravings. Because even though you live in a world of coffee shops and phone chargers, you're still operating on Ice Age software. You, my friend, are a Pleistocene machine running on Holocene hardware. Let's start with fear. Ever notice how you react faster to a shadowy figure at night than to, say, Your boss's slow-building disappointment? That's not a character flaw, it's survival instinct. Ice Age humans didn't have the luxury of second-guessing fear. If you hesitated, you got eaten. Fear wasn't just helpful, it was essential. It sharpened your senses, dumped adrenaline into your bloodstream, and got your legs moving before your brain caught up. And that gut feeling you get? The hair standing up on your neck? That's your ancient alarm system. It once told your ancestors when a saber-tooth was lurking or a rival clan was nearby. Today, it's overreacting to social awkwardness and traffic. Now let's talk food. Why do we crave sugar and fat like it's oxygen? Because back in the Ice Age, it was precious. A burst of sweetness meant fruit. A slab of fat meant survival through the cold months. Your ancestors who gobbled high-calorie food on sight, they lived. The ones who politely waited probably didn't. Fast forward to now, and your brain still thinks winter is coming. That's why you polish off the chips before realizing you're full. That's not weakness. That's 50,000 years of evolutionary success, awkwardly applied to snack time. Then there's tribalism, your need to belong. That goes way back. In the Ice Age, you were born into a tight group, and leaving it meant death. So your brain developed a powerful loyalty circuit. Inclusion felt safe. Exclusion felt dangerous. Today, that instinct plays out in fan clubs, sports rivalries, politics, and internet debates. You're wired to find your people and to side-eye the outsiders. It's not always logical, but it's deeply human. And yes, this extends to status too. Ever felt irrationally good about a social media like? That's your brain hitting the "you're doing well in the tribe" button. In Ice Age terms, it means you're liked, respected, safe. The village won't throw you out when food runs short. It's also why public failure feels awful. Embarrassment is a vestigial fear of exile. Mess up in the Ice Age and you risk becoming wolf chow. Mess up in modern life and, well, you just relive it in the shower for a decade. Next, let's poke at romance. Ice Age mating strategies weren't simple. It wasn't just about muscles and mammoth meat. Traits like intelligence, creativity, and kindness mattered because they meant better survival odds. A partner who could tell stories, share food, and not lose it under pressure, that was hot. So when you feel drawn to someone who's funny, clever, or calm under stress, that's your DNA whispering, mate with that one. But the biggest Ice Age legacy might be our imagination. Other animals survive. Humans anticipate. We dream. We plan. We imagine futures that don't exist yet, and then we build them. That's how our ancestors crossed frozen continents and turned bone into shelter. And it's how you decide to switch careers, move cities, or start projects your ancestors couldn't dream of. The same brain that once mapped migration routes now maps life goals. Here's the wild part. Most of the modern world is built against these instincts. We sit all day instead of chasing prey. We snack endlessly instead of fasting between mammoth steaks. We scroll instead of telling stories face to face. Our instincts haven't caught up to our inventions. But that's not bad news. It's power if you learn to work with it. Your ancient brain isn't broken, it's just outdated for this new environment. But knowing that gives you the upper hand, you can train it, redirect it, remind it that you're not actually at risk of frostbite or exile if your Wi-Fi drops. So the next time you flinch at a loud noise, feel anxious in a crowd, or crave comfort food when stressed, don't beat yourself up. Thank your ancestors. They gave you instincts tough enough to weather the Ice Age and dreams big enough to reshape the planet. Up next, we're wrapping this epic journey with a final reflection. How the Ice Age didn't just shape our past, but laid the foundation for everything we now call human. Culture, courage, creativity. You've walked in their frozen footprints. Now let's bring it all home. So here we are, after glaciers, grit, mammoth hunts, and midnight fires, after migration, myth, survival, and speculation. One question still hangs in the cold air. What does it all mean? Why does it matter that humans survived the Ice Age? Because it wasn't just about staying alive, it was about becoming human. Think about it. Everything you value today, storytelling, cooperation, invention, resilience, emotion, was forged under a sky of snow. We didn't inherit civilization and then grow wise. We grew wise because we had nothing else. Fire didn't fall from the heavens. We sparked it with flint and fury. Shelter wasn't handed to us. We stitched it from sinew and hope. There was no plan, no promise of survival, just instinct, just each other. And yet, here we are. The Ice Age didn't just test our species, it tempered it. It shaved off the weak edges, pushed our limits, forced us to evolve not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It demanded that we collaborate, care, innovate, and imagine. We didn't survive because we were the biggest or fastest. We weren't. A hungry cave lion could take us down in seconds. A broken leg without help meant death. A winter without planning meant extinction. We survived because we connected, because we looked at each other and said, "I've got you." We shared food, we passed down stories, we buried our dead. We painted on walls so someone, anyone, would know we were here. We invented not because it was fun, but because failure meant oblivion. That's the heart of the Ice Age legacy. Not the bones in museums, not the flint knives behind glass, but the raw, blazing human spirit that refused to quit. It lives in every innovation you use, every song you hear, every moment you feel wonder or grief or awe or joy. That's not just your modern self, that's your Ice Age self, still breathing through the noise. And here's the twist, we still need those lessons, because even now in our climate-controlled world of takeout and traffic, life still throws cold spells, grief, uncertainty, fear, isolation. You don't need to outrun a mammoth anymore, but you still need courage, still need community, still need that spark of hope in the dark. Your ancestors survived on less than you can imagine. No tech, no therapy, no safety nets. And yet they carved meaning from frost and art from ash. So whatever you're going through, know this. You come from a line of people who stared into the frozen void and built fire. That resilience is yours. That wildness is yours. That story is yours. And now, as we end this journey through the Ice Age, you carry something forward. Not just knowledge, not just curiosity, but perspective. Next time you're outside on a cold day, feel the wind on your face and remember, your ancestors walked through worse, with less, and still managed to leave behind the bones of a legacy strong enough to reach you. So, honor them, not just by remembering, but by living. Boldly, creatively, with fire in your chest and connection in your heart, because the Ice Age didn't end. It evolved, and the spirit that endured it, it still burns inside you. Thanks for walking this ancient path. Now go make your mark with the same grit that shaped the first humans. Firekeeper, you've got this. By the time the ice began to retreat for good, melting back into mountaintops and myths, humans had already mapped the known world with nothing but memory, footprints, and instinct. But the retreat of the ice didn't mean things got easier. It meant everything changed. Suddenly, the hunting grounds shifted. Familiar megafauna vanished. Mammoths and woolly rhinos, saber-tooths and giant sloths, they disappeared, some gradually, others in a flash. Whether by changing climate, overhunting, cosmic impact, or all of the above, the old world died. And the humans? They didn't just survive, they pivoted. Again, because adaptability wasn't just a skill, it was our superpower. In the wake of the Ice Age, hunter-gatherers didn't cling to the past. They morphed into herders, planters, traders, builders. They took the grit of Pleistocene life and sculpted it into Neolithic mastery. Farming didn't show up all at once. It was experimental, careful, wild wheat, slowly nurtured, barley coaxed from rocky soil, Goats lured from cliffs to corrals. It took generations, but the same minds that tracked reindeer across glaciers now tracked seed patterns, rainfall, and soil memory. And with that shift from wild to domestic, from mobile to rooted, the human brain underwent its next great metamorphosis. We started thinking in systems. We began tracking seasons instead of herds, building calendars instead of campsites, planting roots, literally and figuratively. Villages formed, then towns, and somewhere, for the first time, someone sat still long enough to look up and wonder about the stars, not as omens for weather, but as maps, as clocks, as gods. The Ice Age mindset, sharpened by suffering, tempered by teamwork, became the foundation of civilization. And here's the twist. We didn't become human after the Ice Age. We became human because of it. Every tool, every story, every shared fire in a blizzard, every decision to help rather than hoard, it all led here, to cities, to writing, to rockets and vaccines and libraries and memes. Without the crucible of the Ice Age, we don't get to now. And that brings us to the next chapter of this journey, the part where Ice Age wisdom becomes strategy. Because it turns out that those ancient instincts, they're not obsolete. In fact, the more chaotic the modern world becomes, climate shifts, pandemics, social breakdowns, the more those primal tools become relevant again. Resilience, adaptability, shared purpose, creative problem-solving under pressure. Sound familiar? We're not so different from those first firekeepers. We just swapped bone spears for credit cards and saber-tooths for inboxes. But the challenge is still brutal, still real. And the solution? Still ancient. Stick with your group. Keep the fire burning. Adapt. Create. Tell stories. Remember the dead. Teach the young. Respect the forces bigger than yourself. Leave something behind worth finding. Because no one survives the Ice Age or modern life alone.